Favorite equipment by elimination on episode 478 of the Actual Astronomy Podcast. I'm Chris, and joining me is Shane. We are amateur astronomers who love looking up the night sky, and this podcast is for everybody who enjoys going out under the stars. So we'll talk about our favorite equipment by elimination here in a moment, Shane. But I was wondering, you've got a new or new to you, I think, solar telescope. Can you just sort of refresh mine and the listeners' ears on what you recently picked up?
Yeah, sure. It's a Coronado Hydrogen Alpha Etalon. Now this one is from the pre-Meade Coronado. So I forget of what or in what year, but when Meade was still around, they purchased Coronado and changed a little bit of the manufacturing. So anyway, this is a 90 millimeter objective. It has I think they call it a T-Max tuner, which is really just like a tilt tuner. So you have a little dial on the side that you can rotate either direction, and it either increases or decreases the angle of the etalon in relation to the primary objective of your telescope. And
Oh,
what this, go ahead.
okay, maybe you're going to explain. I was going to ask, like, what is an etalon exactly? That was going to be my question.
Yeah, the etalon is what filters the hydrogen alpha wavelength and really rejects everything else. And then part of a hydrogen alpha setup is your diagonal has a blocking filter in there, I think is what it's called, which rejects like 99 point, I don't know, three or four nines of light, something along those lines, which, the etalon gets the right light through, and then the blocking filter just reduces the brightness so that it's safe to observe.
So the etalon, like, what is it exactly? Is it like a prism or a lens, and like how does like turning a dial adjust it? Like those were my
Yeah.
questions.
Yeah, so it's a big lens basically. It's not a prism, that's for sure, but I'm not sure exactly how it works. I assume it's similar to, any other filter. It just, allows certain wavelengths through. Now the tuning, so how do I describe this? The tuner is a separate component, and the tuner is between the etalon and the primary objective of the telescope. And it changes the angle of that etalon in relation to your primary objective. And changing that angle allows you to see different things on the sun. So you can kind of go in the middle. And if you go in the middle, you'll see some surface detail and you'll see some prominences. But if you really want the prominences to stand out, you just keep turning the dial a little bit, and then the prominences become very, very apparent, but you lose a lot of the surface detail. And then similarly, if you want the surface detail to be the primary thing to look at, you really just turn this little dial the other way. It changes the angle of the etalon, and now the prominences kind of disappear, but the surface detail all of a sudden just comes to life, and you can see it, and it's amazing. So it's a very rudimentary mechanism that allows this to happen. And this type of tuning is what a lot of solar telescopes have used. If you look at a lot of the newer LUNTs, they have a pressure tuning system, which is somewhat similar, but it uses air pressure rather than the dial, and it varies the distance of the etalon to the objective, I believe is how it works.
Oh,
And the disadvantage of what I have with the tuning wheel is you end up with a bit of a sweet spot in your field of view, where there's just more detail in that sweet spot. So sometimes you have to kind of move the telescope around the sun, whereas the pressure tuner is supposed to create a bigger sweet spot or eliminate the sweet spot altogether.
oh, okay. Yeah, kind of. I think I noticed this when we were looking at the partial eclipse last year. That was last year, like May or something, wasn't it?
Yes.
At your place, because I noticed that with the scope we were looking at. I thought it was like my glasses at first, but then you said no. It's you kind of have to move the telescope around a little bit.
Mhm.
Um, So you said you haven't used it yet, and now is that because you have to do further setup, or you just haven't had the time or the opportunity, or like where are you at with getting this 90 millimeter solar scope going?
Largely opportunity. As you know, the weather has not been that great the last month or so here, and I think I've had it for about a month or so.
Yeah.
So there's that. And then the other part of this is, so I also have an adapter that attaches to the tuner. And this adapter allows you, like it has five plastic screws around it, and it allows you to attach it to the dew shield of a refractor up to 5 inches. And the only dew shield I have that sort of fits this thing is the TSA 102.
Mm.
And, because that's a triplet, it takes a bit of time to acclimatize. And with our cold temperatures lately, I just haven't had the desire to take the TSA outside either. So this will have to wait for a little bit warmer temperatures. I'd say once we're into the plus 10 Celsius range is when I'll take the TSA out and give this thing a try.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we have not been anywhere near that, but I see that in the far future forecast, like 2 weeks down the line.
Yeah, it's not far. And really, even like a +5 day, I'd have no problem. Like temperature won't damage an Etalon. It's more so just there's a lot of time required to let the TSA get to temperature and then start observing. And nothing highlights like kind of errors in your system more than hydrogen alpha observing. So like if you don't have an acclimatized telescope, it will be far more apparent during hydrogen alpha observing compared to anything else you'll do. Same thing with like dirty eyepieces. Anything like that is just magnified with hydrogen alpha. So you really need to have everything tuned properly or else you'll notice it.
So just so I understand, so you like I'm kind of picturing that it's an objective, it has some sort of adapter, and then that can fit inside a threaded dew shield, and then you thread it on, and then the light passes through the etalon, this objective mechanism, and then goes through the objective of your refractor, and then you can just have whatever you want in the light path of that instrument.
Sort of. The one thing that isn't quite right is the adapter part. There's
Oh,
no threads on the adapter. It just slides over top of the dew shield, and then you
oh,
use these plastic screws to tension it on.
okay.
Yeah. Now, the Etalon and the tuner are threaded. And if you had a Coronado 90 millimeter hydrogen alpha scope, this would turn it into a double stack. You could just screw this on to the existing Etalon
Hmm.
and really level up your hydrogen alpha then.
Okay. Huh. So that would work on other scopes too, then like you don't have to have a specific um like thread size or telescope size to put it on, other than I imagine it has to be larger than about 3 inches.
Yeah, so it will fit onto any telescope. I'm just pulling out my ruler here. The diameter of this adapter is just a hair under 6 inches. It's about 5 and 7/8 inner diameter.
Mm.
So as long as the dew shield that you want to attach this thing to is within that tolerance, then yes, it will work. Now, the other part of this though is the plastic screws actually aren't that long. Like they maybe go in about a quarter of an inch. So like you know the TSA 102, it's a very large 4 inch.
Mm.
The 90 millimeter Borg is too small actually for this. Like the little screws here don't actually make contact or give it a tight fit on it.
Yeah.
So I'd have to get longer screws in order for that to work. The other part of this, though, you can't use a regular diagonal with this. You need a proper solar observing diagonal.
Oh.
So it's known as a blocking filter. I have one of those for my other solar scope, so I'll just be using that.
Oh. Huh. Sounds pretty cool. Now I was just trying to figure out like what instruments I have that it might work with. Sounds like probably like the Borg 125 or
Mm.
possibly the DC. I'm not sure how big that dew shield is. It's not that big. That would
Yeah, and this thing can be, if you can fit it onto a telescope, it doesn't matter what aperture the telescope is. If it's a larger aperture, then this thing will be sort of an aperture mask. If this thing is larger than the telescope you're using, then that becomes the limiting factor. But as long as you can attach it somehow to the objective and then use a blocking filter at the other end, you will be doing hydrogen alpha observing.
cool. And so I'm just curious, like, can it like does it have any potential to damage the optics of that telescope, or it's just that it's like some of the ultraviolet wavelengths that require you to have that blocking filter at the other end?
The blocking filter is to protect your vision.
Yeah.
Solar observing will not damage your telescope without, like, you could point your telescope at the sun without any filters in it. Like, if you have a refractor, I should say that. If you have a refractor, you can point it at the sun without
Yeah.
any filters and you will not damage your telescope. If you have mirrors and prisms in that light path, those will be damaged because they will absorb the heat because they aren't efficient enough essentially. So yeah, you'll never damage like the coatings or the optics of your telescope solar observing.
Yeah. Okay. No, I was just curious. I was just curious. I don't do that much of this, obviously. So no, I was just wondering. And that sounds like a really cool device. And there's no issue with it having, some years behind it. Like it's not something that degrades over time or anything like that.
The Etalons do not. I suppose they could, but like what the degradation would do would like reduce your contrast essentially. What can degrade over time is there is I think it's called like a ERF or something like that. It's like an energy release filter, maybe. I can't remember what that stands for. And it's in the blocking filter, which is the diagonal. And those can deteriorate over time, but not to the point where it would cause like damage to your eyes. It just, again, would detract from the views. And that ERF is replaceable.
Okay.
And like I think user replaceable, like it's pretty simple. You screw it out and screw a new one in. I believe. I've never done it, but I've read a little bit about it.
Okay. No, I was just curious. I was just curious to hear about that instrument. Hadn't really heard of such a thing before, but anyway, kind of be curious to look through it once you get it up and running.
Yeah. Well, the like I still have the 40 millimeter Coronado Etalons, and I have two of them, so they're double stacked. And the neat thing with those is they're like the threads on those just happen to match the threads on our little 50 millimeter Borgs. So I can just screw those Etalons into the Borg dew shield, and then I've turned my little 50 FL Borg into a hydrogen alpha telescope. And that's what we were using during the eclipse last year.
Yeah, it was very cool.
Yeah, works really well.
Very cool. Yeah. Nice. Okay. Well, I'm eager to hear how this goes and to look through it one day. And do you have any other equipment or anything of that nature inbound or on the wish list?
Well, actually, I just completed a deal with a gentleman in the U.S. A bit of a trade. I sent some gear, and he sent me a 10 millimeter super mono
Oh, no.
centric and a 14 millimeter super mono centric, which I already have one of each. So now I have pairs. So now in the TMBs, I have bino viewing pairs 18, 14, 10, 8, and 6. So I can cover the spectrum quite nicely with the bino viewer, and really excited to get using these things.
Well, and so what do you plan to observe with those? Mostly like planetary stuff or?
Oh no, everything with these. I just wanted a little bit more, or a few more focal lengths, just to cover the various magnifications. But I suspect the 10s or the 14s will probably live in there an awful lot for deep sky observing.
Ah.
I was using the 18s a lot, but a little more power I think would be nice.
What does the eye relief like on the 14s?
It probably is around 10 or 12 millimeters is my guess. They're better than orthos, like in terms of that ratio. And orthos are usually about, I think, 2/3 of the focal length of the eyepiece. So a little bit better than that.
And the 18s, what do they got? Like about
I
15?
don't know. Yeah, 15-ish.
Can you use eyeglasses with them?
Yeah, I do. I do. The other thing to keep in mind with the super monos is while like, there's a 30-degree field of view. So I find that you don't need nearly as much eye relief to take it in. Like even the 5 millimeters are quite comfortable because that field of view is so limiting. It's kind of a weird thing, but it does make viewing with glasses, even though the eye relief is quite short, it makes it quite doable.
Ah, that's pretty cool. Have I looked through the 18s before? I'm trying to remember.
I think you probably have. Like I've had them for a while and I'm usually observing with them. Although, with that being said, you and I lately, when we get together, I've typically been mono viewing and I may not have had it, but yeah, I'm not sure.
Reminds me, we have those eyepieces from Justin to try, and I
Mm,
let him know that they arrived safe and sound. I think he had sent them like in February during the warm spell, and then we had that brutally cold spell for a number of weeks, and now we've been under cloud here for a few weeks. So I'm kind of hoping that at some point you can come out and we can maybe get those and maybe some of these running sort of side by side and in the observatory on some of this equipment would be good.
yeah, yeah. Justin sent a bunch of microscope eyepieces, and I think well, from what I recall, they're all very high-end microscope eyepieces. Like, I think the Zeiss SPLs, which
Uh,
I've read lots about, and I'm super
no,
curious to try.
oh yeah, I'm so curious to try them out. It's just these conditions have, I mean, there's just been no conditions. Like I've gone out to the cabin, the observatory several times, even thinking that I might get some observing in. And remember one night it was like a 3/4 moon. And I mean, I feel like we couldn't even see the moon at all in any
Mm.
way whatsoever. It wasn't even like giving us any sort of illumination. It was just totally dark up there. The clouds are so deep and thick, sadly. So, yeah, fingers crossed we get into some better. I also have some of that cleaning stuff from our friend Alistair to
Mm.
try too, and I again just haven't had the opportunity there to do that either. Yeah, just sort of too bad, but that's the way it goes. So yeah, shall we move on to the main topic of conversation here, Shane? You kind of came up with this one a little bit. Maybe you want to sort of give us a bit of a rundown.
Yeah, I thought, you and I have multiple telescopes, multiple eyepieces, and really kind of multiple everything. And I thought it'd be kind of neat if you and I both decided, if we were forced to reduce our astronomy collection to one telescope, one mount, one tripod, let's say three eyepieces and a couple of accessories and a star chart, what would you pick? And I spent a little time thinking about that this morning. In fact, quite a bit of time while I was enjoying my first coffee of the day. And do you want me to go first, or do you want to go first?
Sure, yeah, go for it.
Okay. I thought, what's kind of my design criteria here, and really the only thing I came up with was, build something or pick something, I guess, that applies to say 90% of the scenarios or use cases of how I like to observe. So what that did to me is it actually, because I was started to write the list down and then I thought, no, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't align to my, typical way of observing. So where I landed was, maybe I'll start with the telescope. I'm going to pick the Takahashi TSA 102. Now, when I first started writing the list, I actually started with the Borg 90FL because I thought the Borg is super lightweight. It's wide field. It does, magnification okay-ish. And then, I thought, but, I'm not really a wide field observer. I don't really need something that portable most of the time. I really like, pristine optics and the ability to bino view. So that's where the TAC TSA 102 came into the picture. Optically, it's near perfect. It's fantastic. It can be a planetary beast because you can put all kinds of magnification at it, and it doesn't seem to wilt.
Mhm.
It does, for me anyway, it does enough of a wide field if I want it. So it satisfies that if I really want to see something, larger than, what the monocentrics show me. And I mentioned already, it is Bino viewer friendly, so I can use my Bino viewer in there natively without any kind of Barlow or magnifier. It has a great focuser. It has a two-speed feather touch on there, and it really, really is just a pleasure to use. And as far as like sort of detractors from this one or cons for picking this scope, it certainly is big and heavy. Like I'm not going to take this thing on an airplane, on a trip. I'd have to take a pair of binoculars or maybe the Borg FL. And then the other con with this scope is it does take a little while to cool down. It's certainly noticeable compared to any 4-inch doublet. Like your TAC 100, you're observing way sooner than I am because that thing is almost instantly adjusted to the temperatures, whereas the TSA does need a little time.
Mm.
So that's the telescope. The mount and the tripod, I would stick with my Stellar View M2C mount. I love that mount. It does such a great job with the TSA. It's a very simple mount, alt as, no motors, just put the thing on the ground and away you go. The tripod, I was thinking about my Burlaback Uni 28. It's a beautiful tripod. It's exceptionally stable, but it's quite heavy. And if I go back to my design principle about kind of the 90%, I do a lot of backyard observing. And, even when I'm not backyard observing, it's just nice to have a lighter tripod. So I would use my Gitzo carbon fiber. I forget which one it is, like a Series 5 or something like that. It has like 2-inch legs. It's very, very stable. Not as stable as the Burlaback, but very stable and exceptionally light. Like the M2C on that tripod is like easy to like lift with one arm over my head and just walk around with it. It really doesn't weigh that much. Has variable height. It really kind of meets all of my needs.
Nice.
So, moving on to eyepieces, this is where it gets a little interesting.
Yeah,
As somebody
maybe
who
we should maybe we should cut you some slack here before we get into this.
oh,
Not gonna hold you to if you want to pick your Bino viewer some way somehow, and then you can pick an eyepiece in doubles. I'll give
oh,
yeah,
okay.
give
Well,
give you that one. We got I mean it's only fair.
okay. Well, let me come at you then with two different lists. The first list I prepared here is adhering to the rules of truly just three eyepieces. So what I said I would do is I have two Nikon MC2 zooms. So these are made for Nikon spotting scopes, but they adapt to like astronomical telescopes quite easily. They have a 7 millimeter to 21 millimeter range, which on this scope, actually it might be 9 millimeter to 21. No, I think it's 7. On the TSA, that gives me a magnification range of 39 times all the way up to 116, which really hits the sweet spot for most of my observing. Those MC2s are outstandingly sharp zooms. I would say near ortho-like performance. The downsides is you're also getting kind of ortho-like fields of view, like they're not very wide. And the eye relief gets a little tight on it as well, but I find it very usable and they're just outstanding performers. So I take those two for the bino viewing. And then I would also take the APM UFF 30 millimeter for some wide field views as well. Now, because you gave me some slack here, I think if I was to pick like three bino viewing pairs, um, I think I would probably go with. I have a pair of 25 millimeter Zeiss Opmis, OPMI. They're again microscope pairs, but they are just something else. Like they are so wonderful. They're so comfortable with the eye relief. They're only about a 50-degree field of view, but they're just a joy to use. And, something else that I don't mention enough, I think, is when I'm bino viewing, I feel like using two eyes, even a narrow field of view, seems extremely immersive. And like a 50 millimeter bino viewing field of view almost feels like a 70-degree field mono viewing. Um, and I know it isn't, it's still a narrower field of view, but it just feels like that immersiveness. And as such, I don't feel like I need to have, the widest field of view with my bino viewers, but I'd probably pick the 25 Zeiss Opmes. Now, close race would be the 24 millimeter Panoptics from Teleview just for that maximum field of view. And then I would probably do the 14 millimeter super monos, and then probably the 8 millimeter super monos. Gives me a nice range of magnifications, and I can pretty much observe anything I want with that setup. Yeah, I think that's where I'd leave that. And then accessories, well, one would be the bino viewer, and then the other one is an adjustable height chair. My Burlap Chiron. You and I have talked at length about how important an observing chair is and how it can extend sessions and also allow you to see more detail and probably even go a half a magnitude or so deeper because you're just relaxed at the eyepiece. So a chair is absolutely essential for me. And then I'm kind of cheating on the star chart, and I think you know where I'm going here. I'm going to use the Nexus digital setting circles for my star chart. Because then all I really need is a list and away I go. And just to tell you how much, I really enjoy the digital setting circles. If this was disqualified because it's not really a star chart, I think I would get rid of my observing chair in favor of the digital setting circles. I think I'd rather have shorter sessions without a chair. If I can quickly find, any object in the sky using the setting circles, particularly when I'm in the city and it's really hard to star hop because you can't see the stars. So anyway, that's kind of my setup. I don't use Barlow's really. It's exceptionally rare for me to use filters, so none of that stuff really entered my mind as options here. So I've just said a lot, so maybe I'll just pause and let you comment.
Yeah, no, that sounds really good to me. I figured you were going to put the TSA and binder viewers in there. How do you find the Nexus working with the M2 mount?
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, no issues at all.
And that's you find that at I feel like that mount is so small for the TSA, but I mean, you're the one using it.
Yeah, I forget what the rating is on that mount, like 25 pounds or something like that. And the TSA, when it's all loaded up, is probably around 12. Um, so yeah, no, it rides really well on that mount. Now, with the Gitzo tripod, it is a little more vibrate, like not quite as stable as I would prefer. The Burlap pretty much eliminates all vibration, but no, the mount is really good.
Nice. Huh. Very good. And do you have another Alta Az mount that's a step up from that?
No, no, I don't. The only other alt as that I have would be the Burlap Caster 2.
Hmm. Any thoughts on getting a Rowan 75 or something like that?
Yeah, a little bit. They certainly intrigue me. They look like beautiful mounts. Um, the kind of my holdup is like the Rowan 75 would be the right size for me. But what I like about the Rowan 100 is it has slow motion controls, which I would really, really like. Um, but that's a whole nother level of everything. It's a fairly heavy mount. It's certainly a costly mount. But I've thought about it a little bit. If I ever wanted a larger telescope, like a 6-inch refractor, then I'd definitely probably get that Rowan 100.
Hmm.
And they're adaptable, or they have encoders in them if you want, which then you can plug in your Nexus digital setting circles. So if I had to pick like one mount that I think is like my perfect mount, that I don't own, it would probably be that Rowan 100.
Yeah, I mean that's one that's really caught my eye for quite some time as well. But yeah, well, that sounds really good, Shane. Interesting stuff. Maybe I'll just run through mine. I mean, mine's really not that interesting because really I've spent the past, you know, probably close to the past 10 years getting myself set up with what I currently have. So if I don't pick my observatory as an accessory, I've certainly gone really quite wrong somewhere here. So that's sort of the crux of it is that as long as that can be an accessory, then I'm off to the races.
I think that's valid.
Yeah, because that's just the cornerstone of my permanent setup now. And of course, the 7-inch refractor, which to be honest works a little bit better than I thought it would work. So I'm really with the few nights that I've had on it so far, really quite pleased with it. One of the things which I had debated for a long time was to go with either a larger refractor like a like a 6-inch ED type scope or a 7-inch acro if I could find one. I was lucky enough to find one, which was less than a 6-inch ED anyway. Um, was the big debate in my mind was the trade-off in aperture. However, in practical use, I mean, it's hair splitting. The light gathering is so similar between a 7-inch refractor and say a 10-inch reflector. And in people that have run comparisons, apparently it's quite identical to like a 9 1/4 inch or even getting close to a 10-inch Schmidt Cassegrain. But having looked through a lot of reflectors in the 10-inch size, I feel fairly confident on commenting on the fact that it is like very, very close to that. Doesn't resolve as much detail, but what it does resolve, you resolve easier. It's really hard to explain until you've looked through a refractor this size. But you have, I mean, any comments on that?
Yeah, well, it's wonderful. I would agree that it resembles the views through a 10-inch reflector, and but you get that refractor field, so a little wider and just nice and sharp. It's a wonderful telescope.
Yeah. And out of all my instruments, like I spent so much time observing with my 5-inch refractor that I get what people say about the secondary color and some of the softness that can introduce because of the blurring of the spectrum. However, there is an offset at a certain point. Like I don't know that a 6-inch ED would be better on the planets, but definitely the 7-inch achromat is I can see more and that detail easier in the 7-inch refractor than I can in my 5-inch refractor that is apochromatic. So you do see more. You also see this blurriness. But if you want to compare apples to apples, well, I'm sure if you got a 5-inch achromat and put it next to a 5-inch apochromat, then you're going to very quickly probably in all likelihood of enjoy the views through the apochromat scope better on something like the moon or the planets or something. But that's not what we're comparing here. I'm just comparing the equipment that I have, right?
Mhm.
So in essence, it does kind of win out a bit on the planets too, especially once you put some of those, um, chromatic aberration filters on there. For me, the eyepieces are, I mean, I've spent so long getting this tuned up for a really specific set of eyepieces that, yeah, and it is just 3 eyepieces. I always tell people you only need 3 eyepieces, even though I have like a whole crate of eyepieces. I mean, I actually really don't have that many eyepieces. And if you count sort of some of the eyepieces I got really, really cheap that are pretty good, like I have one of those Meade 4.7 millimeter 82 degrees, and I think you can get similar eyepieces from Explore Science and others and Celestron and such. And I think I got mine for like $80 or something in a blemish discount. bin or something, and it's such a great eyepiece. But apart from those kind of eyepieces and my full set of Pentaxes, it's pretty easy to pick. One of kind of two minimal sets, which is my 40 millimeter Pentax, which is a wide field, 70-degree eyepiece, which in the 7-inch gives me about a 2.5-degree true field of view, which is quite a wide field for a telescope that sucks in as much light almost as a 10-inch Dob. So if you
Yeah, no kidding.
yeah, if you do that kind of math, because that's what I was comparing to when I was thinking about getting a scope, that if I couldn't find a refractor like this, that maybe I would get a 10-inch reflector, because I think that's such a great instrument, and such a great all-around instrument. But anyway, with the 40 in, I get a wider field of view than I could have with that instrument anyway, and without having to sort of climb a ladder in the observatory to look through it. The refractor works quite well with that eyepiece. And then I have the 17 millimeter Explorer in the observatory there, and then either the 12 millimeter Explorer or the 12.5 millimeter Doc Terror, and then a 2 times Barlow.
Mhm.
And that's just such a great setup because, I mean, with the 2 times Barlow and those three eyepieces, so if we just call them simply the 17 and the 12, the 40 gives me 27 power, which of course is 54 power. Barlow probably wouldn't do it because the 17 gives me about 63.5 power. So you'd probably always want to pick that eyepiece over the 40 XW Barlow. And then, so that's 63 and a half or so, becomes about 127 power when you Barlow it, which is a pretty good jump up from the 90X that the 12 millimeter gives, which Barlow gives 180. So that's a really nice progression of power where you have 27, 63-ish or 64, whatever you want to call it, 90, 127, and 180. There's gaps, but of not real significance. The only gap being in there at about the 100. And my ideal power that I find I can use most nights is about 150 power. But I'm working on an eyepiece that will give me that power. So what kind of eyepiece is that? My focal length is 1080 by 150. So I need about like a 7 millimeter. So I have my Pentax 7, which I can't recall if I've used that in the scope or not. But of course, that'll give about 150 to 155 power, somewhere in there, which is about like an ideal power, if you ask me, just for the general area where my observatory is. Typically, I can hit about 150 power on most nights, give or take a little bit, and that is a nice sized magnification for the moon or planets or even globular clusters or that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's a great spread.
Yeah. So that, I mean, but I've spent like so long getting it down to that, such that, I mean, really with the Barlow and that, I mean, and I typically find at 150 or so, typically I want things to be a little bit larger, especially with the 7. So 2x on the 12, if it would do 180, if not 127, is something that I could easily live with. So just kind of got to wait for the seeing and that to come around. Again, I'd also pick a chair as one of my accessories, and the AZEQ6 mount that's just the mount that I have. It was third hand, inexpensive, quite like it. And for Star Chart, I don't know. I mean, that's a tough one. I have so many star charts. I'm a bit of a star chart aficionado. I really I feel like out of all this stuff, when you sent me these couple lines here, one chart, that was the one that really got me the most because yeah, I mean you're laughing, but you also contribute to this because you just gifted me recently, or in the fall anyway, a beautiful copy of the laminated edition of Sky Atlas 2000. I'm like, but that's the chart. Like today, if I was picking a chart, that would be the chart, just
Mhm.
because that chart just means a lot to me. It's the chart that I've used. I mean, that was my first real star chart. I think that is very much like a perfect star chart as long as you have a table to lay it out on. I have two such tables in my observatory. I might even build another one because you gave that to me and I just want to stick it in there forever. And because it's laminated, even though my observatory isn't 100% sealed against the elements and does get a bit of moisture in there, it would be totally fine. It's like that is such a perfect star chart. But I also have, the Uranometria, I have the Pocket Atlas, I have the Interstellarum Atlas, which I find indispensable as well. Um, and then of course I do use the Sky Safari quite a bit. But that I find is the most limiting, actually, out of all this. The telescope eyepieces mount, that's all pretty simple. Like I've worked
Mhm.
towards that for a long time, so that pretty much is what it is. But a star chart, I feel like you've really overly limited me there. That one is the one that I get the most hung up on, I think.
Yeah. Well, yeah, for me, if I had to pick a physical paper star chart, I really, really like the Pocket Sky Atlas Jumbo Edition for
Oh,
use at the eyepiece. It's just perfect. Now, at a desk, I love many other charts, but yeah, it's really hard to beat that Pocket Sky Atlas.
yeah. Yeah, and I mean to be honest, like I'm like even though I just bought the seven, well, I mean I've had it for over a year now, but the 7 inch and all that, like in a sort of oddly, I don't oddly get hung up on any particular telescope. I find like there's so many different views that you can have through so many different instruments. Like when you had that 90 millimeter out that night with us when Alistair was visiting, it was like,
Mhm.
oh, that's like my favorite telescope tonight. And then, like a lot of nights when Mike has his 12-inch out after I've been doing a lot of observing, maybe with my 60 millimeter or other telescopes, then it's like I don't even want to look through those telescopes. The 12-inch is my favorite telescope. But so, I just don't get that hung up. It's a lot of fun to have and a privilege to have different instruments to look through and not to have to own a whole pile of different instruments. And that was the other thing that led me to a 7-inch refractor is then, it's something you and I had debated for a long time was, getting a big refractor, either both of us, and then it's nice at least one of us has it now, and then, you can come look through it anytime you want and make a 20-minute drive. So, I do like that aspect of having different people with different equipment. Having a 10-inch reflector in an observatory doesn't seem a whole heck of a lot of difference when Mike has a 12-inch reflector sitting 20 feet outside my observatory. So
Mhm.
anyway, but yeah, that's kind of what I've worked towards, and that's kind of would be sort of my favorite equipment or desert island uh, equipment, so to speak. I think I've sort of maxed out my accessories and chart. Yeah, the chart being the most difficult of all.
Yeah, no, that's fair. No, great setup and very versatile. Covers pretty much everything you'd want to do.
If I was to pick, because we talked about a different mount for you, and
Hmm.
when I was initially building the observatory, see, I was looking at a Rowan 100
Hmm.
for a variety of reasons. I do like running in Altaz, which the AZEQ6 does as well, and also just be able to push it around the sky and some of the options it has. Of course, it was much, much, much more expensive than buying a third hand. AZEQ6 was, which I'm very fortunate a listener gave me like an incredible bargain on it. And it works perfectly for what I want to use it for. Took a little bit of learning, but that's sort of on my end, which is fine. Um, but one of the mounts that really has caught my eye recently, if I was to go with a brand new mount, might be that Pegasus Nix 101. I really think that's a neat mount.
Is that a harmonic mount?
It is. It is.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why that mount interests me so much is that one of the things that the AZEQ6 has not going for it is weight. It's pretty heavy, weighs
Hmm.
around 34 pounds. And I think this one is something like about a third of the weight once you factor in like how it would be set up with counterweights and that. So it would reduce the weight load, on the pier in my observatory, and it can run in Aldaz mode, which I quite like. And the
Hmm.
other thing is this, which I didn't quite factor in, and that's that when I was originally putting all this together, I thought that it would be a lot easier to run a telescope sort of in manual, like no power mode on the AZEQ6. And while it is possible, like you can do it, you do not want to do that with a 7-inch refractor. That you can't do that.
Hmm.
I mean, I suppose maybe somebody out there somewhere can do it or can figure out a way to do it, but I would not do that. I feel like that's just a recipe for disaster, like i.e., killing yourself when the thing swings around the wrong way. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
because I've certainly had that with my 4-inch, because I will do that with my 4-inch quite a bit. Or I was doing that before I put the 7-inch on there. Like I would put the 4-inch in and then, but I mean, inevitably in a session, I would get it mixed up. You're tired and you push the clutch the wrong way and the telescope swings through. But with the 4-inch, it's short. It's probably not going to hit you. And you put your hand up and you grab the scope, and it's not a big deal because it weighs 6.5 pounds. When the telescope is more like weighing 35 pounds, you're like the force, that's just too much force, right? Like if it's 12 and a half, if it's 13 or 26 pounds, if it's really swinging, that's fine. If it's 35 pounds and it's swinging like that, and that's like 140 pounds coming at you, yeah, I mean, that might even just lift me off the ground, right? Like you're going to feel 140 pounds, like that kind of force, right? So,
It's a
yeah,
lot of telescope.
it's a lot of telescope. So having that clutch and the ability to go manual is is not something I like now as much as that was like the main feature I was looking for in the mount, and now it's like the main detriment. Like I don't like it because
Mm.
it's a safety issue. Really is what it boils down to. And when I was getting it ready, I was very concerned that I wouldn't be able to get it locked down or it come loose in the cold and all that, but it hasn't. It's been fine, but it's still like in the back of my mind somewhere. So something like a Pegasus Nix 101, that I feel would be a nice mount because I don't think it has those type of challenges. The other thing is that even though I've kind of adapted and thanks to Alistair for helping me out with it, I'm not getting any of the cable wraps anymore and that sort of thing. But you do get like the cables hanging down awkwardly with the AZEQ6. It just doesn't feel complete or something. Like it feels pretty janky. Like you've got this mount, this telescope, the observatory all set up, but then you just have to leave these cables like hanging down from the mount. I don't know. It's not my favorite thing in the world. So anyway, with the Nix mount, the cables in that come out the bottom. So you can just kind of tie them off and zip tie them or whatever. I like that just for the sake of not having that as a tripping hazard, because I can tell like when I have people, especially newcomers in the observatory, it's like they're trying to make sure that they don't get caught up in these cables, right? Even though
Mhm.
like that wouldn't happen. Even if it did, it's not an issue because I have a lot of slack on the cables and everything. You can tell like people are looking at them and going, oh, like there's these cables whipping around with this thing too, right? It just doesn't feel right. Um, and yeah, that Nix mount can run in Aldaz mode as well. Not sure if I mentioned that, with a lighter um, counterweight bar. And so I do. I think that would be an interesting mount, and it's supposed to have as much or more carrying capacity as the AZEQ6. I'm not sure how well it would work with a 7-inch refractor, but I'm assuming well enough.
Yeah, yeah, very interesting. Those harmonic mounts certainly have caught my attention. Um, and if I ever get to a point where I am considering a Rowan 100, I think I'll have to research these to make sure I get, exactly what I'm hoping to get.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think with the TSA, you'd be fine on the Rowan. It's just with the larger, even though like you'll kind of see demos in that with these larger Altas with bigger scopes. I don't know. Maybe I'm just not doing something right or being overly cautious. I don't know. It just once I got up to my 5 inch in the observatory, like it felt sketchy. Even though the weight difference there, my 4 inch is 6.5 pounds. The 5 inch is, let's just say, 9 pounds. Maybe even just a hair more once you factor in a little bit, and then plus same accessories and that. So you're talking about like a 3 pounds difference, but it's 50% more. Really is kind of sort of. It's really about 50% more weight once you factor it in, and it feels like a completely different instrument when you have a telescope that weighs just over 5 pounds versus a telescope that really weighs about 10 pounds plus accessories. Yeah, it's just not doable with the clutches anymore. So I feel like, yeah, that's pretty negated. Sure, yeah, if you want to back them off, and then if you're trying to do something particular like a one-off or a couple times, that's fine. But I really thought I'd be able to back those off, cruise around the sky, lock them down, and you'd be laughing. But I think it's just not the greatest setup. So I think in a way that's why we've come to these harmonic mounts, even as a visual observer. And I was chatting with Peter, who's at one of the Sky Villages, and even he was putting like his visual observing scope on one of these harmonic mounts. And probably 2 years ago, I would have scratched my head and thought, why would you do that? But now I'm like, yeah, yeah, that's a good idea, actually. So hopefully I'm getting that right. Hmm.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think that if I ever did find one for a good price, it's not bad. I see they start at about 4 grand, and that's not too bad. And they make an 88 as a lighter one too, just so you know, for 2,800. So interesting what they're actually making these days as far as some options for telescope mounts go.
Yeah, yeah, no shortage of different things to consider there if somebody's in the market.
Yeah. And as far as the Teleview eyepieces, any thoughts or dreams of those?
Of the new ones,
Yeah.
not really. I'm interested. So, I'll certainly read the reviews. But again, the way I observe, I just don't think those are right for me. Um, Again, bino viewing, right? If I had two of those stuck to a bino viewer, I think that's quite a bit of weight. But we'll see what the reviews are like and kind of go from there. How about you?
At Type 7, right?
Pardon me?
They're Type 7. Is that what they're
Yeah, yeah, Nagler Type 7.
seeing if there's pricing on it yet? No, not seeing any pricing on it yet. I think for me the 9 is at some point in my future really like the idea of the 9 millimeter, possibly the 5.5 would be pretty cool to have too. I think I could see those ones. Yeah. Don't really have a Nagler. Well, I shouldn't say that. I have the 22 Nagler. I don't have like a set of Naglers, maybe is what I meant to say.
Hmm. Yeah, I have the 31 and I have the 3 to 6 millimeter zoom, and that's all I have for Nagler.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing I have a challenge with is the eye relief. I mean, otherwise, I always like the Naglers, but yeah, I could see having those as well. But yeah. Oh, well, anything else that we wanted to chat about on this one?
That's all I have, sir.
All right. Well, please subscribe, share the show with other stargazers you know. Send us your show ideas, observations, and questions to actualastronomy@gmail.com.
Thank you everyone for listening, and we hope you enjoyed the show. If you are interested in more information, would like to contact us, or if you would like to support the podcast, check out our website, actualastronomy.com.